Are we there yet? No. Are we there yet? Yes, we actually are. Going live, yes, a few minutes after 5, so sorry for all of that. And in all honesty, everybody, I wasn't 100% if I was going to be able to even swing this particular review from September because I will admit, yeah, normally Book of the Month is something that's celebrating an anniversary, and we had a poll at the end of August here on Hail to Stephen King, and it basically came down neck and neck to a couple books that are celebrating anniversaries here in the year of 19, and that was essentially The Talisman and Insomnia, and Insomnia won out by a very, very slim margin, but yeah, nonetheless, it was indeed the victor. But with the Institute coming out and all of the hoopla surrounding that and all of the attention surrounding that, that's what took up the predominance of my attention. And I even reread most of the Institute, just like specific passages and stuff, even after I posted my review here on the horror show. But I crushed through it in about the last week or so, and we are here for the 25th anniversary to discuss, very befitting after the month that we just had, Stephen King's Return to Derry, Maine. That's right. This is my personal collector's edition copy of Insomnia, Mark V. Ziesing books, I believe. So it is a slip-covered, very dope collectible version of this, and it's what I was reading when I was dividing my time between this and the audiobook in the last week, just trying to get through it as quickly as possible. The cover art is really rad. There's old Ralph Roberts looking exhausted and forlorn and, just unable to sleep still. So, yes, we are going to be having a 25th anniversary discussion about Insomnia, which came out in September of 1994. And then at the very end of this, I'm going to be announcing the October book of the month and also a little preview of some of the spectacular stuff that we have coming on Hail to Stephen King here on the Horror Show in the month of September. But yes, I guess now will be where you live audiences that are filtering in right at the moment got to just get the little pregame palaver of sorts. But yes, we're going to start this proper as of right now. So long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime and Fuego. And if it please you, join me here for some special anniversary palaver on Hail to Stephen King. That's right, y'all. So stoked to have everyone who is filtering through here. It has been quite the year of 19 already. I am about to drop a review of In the Tall Grass with Cecil this weekend, which just hit Netflix yesterday on October 4th. We also have a review already up of the first episode of Creepshow that has two different stories. One was done by, it's got the girl who plays the young Grimes all grown up on, kind of grows up on The Walking Dead, and then yes, the first half though is a adaptation of Grey Matter, which has Tobin Bell, and it's a very cool episode, and it adapts one of my favorite Psychic short stories. So our review of that is also up here on the channel. My review of The Institute from this past month. Tons of stuff there, but we're still looking ahead to Dr. Sleep. We already had an awesome film in it, Chapter 2, which I adored as well. But it was kind of ironic that we ended up having this particular 25th anniversary of Insomnia. My deluxe copy of it, my regular one, is seated right there on the shelf in its hardcover form, and there are two different versions of that. One is the red with the white, and then the other is the white with the red. It just says a little flippy floppy thing. But so yes, 25 years ago in 1994, Stephen King decides to return to Derry, one of his most infamous towns aside from Castle Rock. It's those two neck and neck. Now, there have been more stories set in Castle Rock, obviously, and I don't know. Nonetheless, even though later this month we have season 2 of that coming, and I'm really excited about Lizzie Kaplan as a young Annie Wilkes. Seeing some Jerusalem's Lot flavor in there. Who knows if there's going to be anything vampiric factoring in? We know there's going to be some Merrill clan stuff. I'm curious about all of that, but at the end of the day, I still would have preferred a Derry show as opposed to a Castle Rock show. But that is just me, personal preference, obviously, and art is subjective, as I always say. But yeah, what an interesting return to Derry that this is, and it's filled with all kinds of different Easter eggs, very. I mean, it really. It's funny because in On Writing, Cy King described this book and Rose Madder, which he wrote like right after, if I remember correctly. They both deal with themes of abused women and stuff, so that was obviously very heavy on King's heart at the time. But he described both of those and that period where he was just kind of finding his footing as a sober writer a little bit more so. He thinks they're stiff and they're novels that are trying too hard. And I must admit, neither are personal favorites of mine, but I find a lot of merit in both of those. And in some ways, I can kind of see, though, with the tough themes and whatnot, but it makes you wonder why they haven't been adapted. But especially with this book, and as fantastical as it gets in the back half, as I mean, we get like borderline psychedelic with Insomnia. And so, if I'm going to give overall thoughts, which we always do here on the horror show, I will say that I love about half of this book, and then the other half the other half is what really keeps this book from being one of my absolute favorites by Cy King. And so, yeah, 25 years ago, 1994, Return into Derry. And it's interesting, it's nuanced, and yes, but this deluxe edition, as I was showing a little bit in the pregame before we went officially live. So if you were at the beginning of the live broadcast, you saw this already, but for the trimmed down version that happens after this has gone live, this is my deluxe edition done by Mark V. Ziesing Books. And we see our protagonist, Mr. Ralph Roberts, there right in the front. And it has a decent amount of interesting illustrations. They're all in a similar painted style, one that I particularly like. And since I don't need the mouse anymore, at least for the moment, that should be set down. But along with that, just wanted to show you all that, like, check it. This is the extent of the illustrations that we get. So you see the little skeleton floating around Ralph. I'm trying to get like the lighting a bit on it, but yeah, it doesn't have a ton of illustrations though. That's maybe one of my only gripes about it. And I keep forgetting that I'm using this mic. I'm hoping sound quality is okay. In fact, just to double check, let's jump into the chatty room since it's been. I'm gonna move this up a little bit too with hopes that catches me a little bit better. There we go. Still, I'm forgetting because this is the second time I've actually used this particular microphone, but let's jump on here. So yes, collectible illustrated edition. I am a big fan of just the oversized slipcase. Like, I don't know whether it's PS Publishing, whether it's Subterranean Press, whether it's Cemetery Dance. I mean, I'm a fan of all of them, and so. But let's tune into the chat since I have not given it its proper accord right now. And turn that down, huh? Because we don't need that. But yes, okay, we've got 21 peeps on. I see Sarah Counts is here. Howdy, Sarah. The way the camera is angled, it low-key looks like you're dressed as Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice. Or actually, I should probably say Biggie Smalls. Yes, you guys know I always have to get a South Park reference in here wherever I can. Sir Duel, what's up? Me and Robert and our respective ladies are supposed to be going to see Pat Benatar next week. How gangster and spectacular is that? Yeah, not really, obviously. Jacob. Hey, howdy, hey, Fuego. Jacob, I wished it in my last video, man, and I know in a hectic September, I didn't get to wish you a proper cumpleaños, man, but I did it in the previous Hail to Stephen King video, and hopefully you got the chance to see it, man. I didn't say it proper in Facebook. I realized a few days after the fact. Like a dummy, so many birthdays and lots of other exciting stuff going on here on the horror show. Mikey Mnemonic is in, another homie of mine from across the pond. And yes, Mr. Malito is on there. And yes, I know it's late for all of you guys on the other side of the pond. So stoked that you are making an appearance. Sarah says she's been sick in bed all week, so this should be interesting. I couldn't sleep and saw this was on. Yes, Bull Squad, what's up? Yan LL, hey, hi, my King Master. Oh, I'm a King enthusiast, no King Master. But much appreciated for all of the kind words. Jacob says, always wondered if you ever messed that intro up from time to time. Still haven't messed it up on a live stream yet. Yeah, I try to maintain that. I mean, after having done it for nearly 3 years now, and boy, we're approaching the 200th episode of this show, and it's likely going to be the very final episode of the year. I just need to add on an extra 4 episodes. So at some point, it's either going to be November or December in all likelihood, because we have so much that we are going to be announcing here in about 10 days on the horror show for an enormous project of ours. But yeah, it's either November or December. I am going to be giving, maybe December. I'll give like a bonus King episode a week, so I can just make sure to get to the 200. So basically, go back to 2 episodes for 1 week, maybe December. It's gonna happen, so we can just hit that awesome number here at the very end. But no, haven't messed it up as of yet. But over 180 episodes, it's been nuts. Man, this is Easter Egg Central. All the references to it, Mike Hanlon. Yeah, it seriously is, Jacob. I hope you're still on, man. I was just making note of a lot of them as I was jumping through, and once they get to the Tropal Slayer or whatever, and I mean, one of the things they see is Gage's shoe. You know, it's crazy. There's lots of cool stuff in here. No. Mikey Mnemonic says sound is better. That makes me super super happy, man. Yes, that's better. Okay, moving it up. So upward did in fact help. Awesome. Okay, Integrity Farms. Yep, Mikey knows. Definitely a slow burner. Yes, it's definitely a very slow burn. And King says it's one of those plodding, more stiff novels, and I think maybe that's why he admittedly, says that is the case. Okay, show's gonna be fantastic. Okay, so Jacob Hamburg is on, Shauna Smith is on, White Tim. What is up, White Tim? Yo. Okay, so all right, I'm all caught up, so that means we can kind of start this review proper, which means I should probably get my notes, right? Yeah, getting them notes is good. All right, Integrity Farms. Now it's gonna be stuck in my head the rest of the time, and I need to. I'm gonna be going into super talking mode. Okay, y'all. So, Insomnia. Once again, as I said, a book that I feel has some uneven aspects to it because half of it is crazy psychedelic and deals with, astral projection, telepathy. I mean, just it's basically for all who have not read it, I am going to be spoiling things in here, so I'm going to kind of give some favorite quotes, talk about some of my favorite scenes, ask all of you to do the same if you have in fact read this book, if you did return to Derry. And this is what a return to Derry, in my estimation, would have felt like if we had a TV series. And honestly, I think that they should do Insomnia as a TV series as opposed to a film. I feel like it's a long enough book where you could stretch it like Mr. Mercedes style, or what they intend to do with The Outsider, or and oh man, how about that If It Bleeds announcement that Ralph the Detective from The Outsider is going to be coming back. If It Bleeds comes out next May, if I'm not mistaken. King just revealed the new artwork this week, so that's exciting. King and his marketing team are not resting on their laurels, man. They're just like, oh yeah, there's this movie in November, and there's this and this, and you just read The Institute, but we already have his next book all cranked and in the pipeline, ready to go. And the fact that it's going to be 4 novellas, I'm stoked, but I digress. So yeah, I will be spoiling things here and just kind of giving overall thoughts. But yeah, I love half of this book, and I love the half that deals with all of the tower connections and getting into King really expanded so much on his multiverse mythology in this book, and it also has a very just sad and tender story with this protagonist. It's a really interesting rumination and kind of commentary about the nature of aging and just staring down death as you get into your twilight years and stuff like that. And Ralph Roberts is a terrific protagonist. I've read this book 3 or 4 times before this. I still remember the very first time, though, just to give some background and context. The very first time I read Insomnia, it was actually the 4th Stephen King book that I ever read. So when I first started dipping my toe into King about 10 years ago, yeah, because that's the thing. I had only watched stuff up until my mid 20s, and so I had watched a lot of Cy King stuff. I knew how much I loved it, but I don't know. I was more into watching movies, reading comics, stuff like that, and had never really explored King literature proper until this, and it was around my mid 20s. And I read Pet Sematary, then I read The Stand, and then I read It, those being my 3 favorite Cy King books. And they are still the holy trinity for me because I'd seen most of the adaptations, so I at least had a general idea of the type of storytelling that was in everything that has been made for screen originally by King. And I mean, at this point, with there only being a handful, Insomnia, one of them included, that have not been made into a miniseries, a limited series, a couple seasons of a television series, like in the case of Under the Dome, where they went way, way off course. And then, everything else being made for TV, movies, and theatrical stuff. Yeah, I had a pretty general idea for most of the King stuff aside from Dark Tower things. But so after I read it and I started doing a little bit of research, I was like, oh shit, there is another story that takes place in Derry. I have to read that. And I read it, and there was so much that went over my head that I had no idea the what the purpose of all of this was. And so as I went back and started reading everything in order when I started that journey 7 almost 8 years ago after I made that decision, that's when I reread it through and just understood so much more of the context of Ka and Ka-Tet, and it is still the introduction of the Crimson King more or less, and he's more fearsome in this than in any other time that we encounter him. And he's mentioned a great deal in the later books of the Dark Tower, but we don't really meet him until the very end of book 7. So that's yeah, they really laid groundwork greatly. They didn't finish so well in the King camp with the final confrontation with the Crimson King, but this was where he was more or less revealed and explained to a degree as being somebody in this much much higher level of sorts, in this proverbial tower scheme of alternate dimensions and connected universes and stuff like that, that is trying to jump into other worlds and make something happen that will reverberate like aftershocks from an earthquake. And it's like the whole ripple effect with an earthquake, where it just it expands outward and outward and continues going, and everyone feels those aftershocks, those reverberations after the initial hit. And so yeah, that's really all of that stuff in this book. I love the tripped out aspect of when he starts seeing auras around people after he has basically got to the point where he can basically just about not sleep anymore. And that's our protagonist, Ralph Roberts, once again, who loses his wife. And a few months after, the insomnia kicks in, and then he ends up finding a friend is suffering from the same affliction. And so they both start getting these like borderline psychedelic epiphanies of sorts, and they encounter some crazy characters that can only be seen on these higher levels of like the spectrum of existence. Basically, I mean, it is a trip-tastic book that has so many interesting things and things and themes, and expands so much on just the whole King multiverse thing, like I said. But then we have, as you would say in the South Park commentaries, the B plot, the B story in this. And the B story deals very heavily with abortion protests, and the pro-choicers versus the pro-lifers, and a lot of this was happening in the early and mid 90s and stuff. And it was common themes of very intensive disagreement, the bombing of the abortion clinics, all of this crazy stuff. So that was the political climate within which King wrote this book. And it's interesting for the sheer fact that the way King presents his politics here, I will say, it's more surprisingly libertarianly balanced. And I know King is a staunch liberal, and that's cool. Most of my friends are very, very far left, and my parents and a lot of my family very far right. And I'm a registered independent for a reason, because I don't know, politics is not my jam, and yeah, but I am concerned with social issues and things of that nature. So I don't think I'm a non-voter or something stupid like that. But nonetheless, it's interesting with how King is just very, very decidedly, and of his political affiliation in a lot of his tweets and in a lot of stuff that he does, so as not to upset anybody on either side of the spectrum. But it's interesting in this book how even though, yes, the pro-life people and just their viciousness is presented as being worse, he does not present the pro-choice camp as being squeaky clean here either. And he just really doubles down on the fact that if you've read it, the history that this just town has in just negative energy boiling over. And while the big incidents, in the 27-year increments that we catch wind of in the sprawling opus that is Stephen King's it's interesting how they do also double down on the fact that, and they even mention this in it, obviously, that Derry is a town that just has negative energy all the time, and then some of the biggest, craziest things spill over. And who knows, maybe this insane incident that comes at the finale of this book, I don't know. It's definitely larger in scale than anything with the lumberjacks or the craziness of the mobster shootout or and then yeah, it's definitely worse than all the kids getting burned up and the Easter egg hunt. So I mean, yeah, this is maybe this happened a lot sooner than 27 years because of the fact that maybe Pennywise or the entity that used the guise of Pennywise is in fact dead, so now it's just all evil energy all the time or more frequently, or who knows, man. But the B story in this I don't like very much. I don't find it particularly compelling. And so that's why I can say I love half of this book, and it bored like the half that I love of this book, or more or less in some ways 2/3 of this book that I love so much and have such an affinity for. If not for that other third, this could be in my top 10 King things. It really could. But for those just weird thematic disparities, and King does does weave them together well enough, but I mean, still, I mean, it doesn't feel like jagged and just misshapen necessarily. It still has good flow and stuff despite being the slow burn that Jacob mentioned it as. But I don't know. That's just all the stuff with that. It does end in a very grisly fashion, though. So, but really, more so than anything, I do believe at the core of this is just the fright of aging. And King wasn't anywhere. I mean, he wrote this 25 years ago. He's what 72 now, I want to say, and yeah, so 25 years ago. I mean, we're talking he was still in his 40s. So our protagonist is like 70, I want to say, if I remember correctly, and so yeah, King was looking ahead, but he still offers some very intriguing points about this. What a sly thief time was is something that he mentions very early in the book, and the beginning of the book, the prologue it's heart wrenching. It truly is. It's basically King presenting the descent through cancer and the loss of his wife, Carolyn, and it's just it feels so sad and hopeless. And when King is talking about hearing this the carnival music of all of the different people that they went to see and getting second opinions in the books that he was reading and all of the faces trying to take a look at his wife and help her to some degree. And then when he finds out no, the carnival music is actually a death waltz, when he mentions that at the beginning of the book, I'm just like, damn, Psy King. He just gets across that just feeling of just impending just departure and doom, and just the once again the sad and just heartbreakingly hopeless aspect of wanting so badly to help somebody and seeing them waste away and knowing that there's nothing you can do about it. It's really it sets the tone emotionally, yeah, significantly. It really does. And then we flash forward a few months to our main dude, Ralph Roberts. He's kind of trying to move on with his life as best he can, and he has Bill McGovern, the guy who lives below him, who is a older gay buddy of his, who he has a certain cynicism, but he has like has a fashionable essence and a very hilarious wit. And they spend some time with their friend Lois, and who Ralph kind of has the hots for. Also a widower, or a widower. Yes, there's the proper terminology. And so those two have like the makings maybe of a thing, and McGovern is like constantly teasing Ralph about it. And he's like, "You need to get on that, boy," sort of thing. That I'm paraphrasing here, okay? But yeah, so that's kind of our trio. And then excuse me, there is another guy. Dorrance is a very funny, peculiar character. He's this 95-year-old guy who has ties with this like these higher levels, so to speak, as it's described, and has a much deeper knowledge of what is eventually really going down in this book. And Dor just goes carrying around these like books of poems and stuff. And the one that he makes Ralph read, I'm actually gonna mention it at one point in time, because it's the whole each thing I do I rush through so I can do something else. And yet the back half of that poem, I feel like, encompasses just that cynical viewpoint on aging. And so but yeah, so yeah, we fast forward, and all of a sudden, yeah, Ralph starts he starts losing sleep, and he gets up every day he's going to bed at the same time, but each day he's getting up a little earlier, a little earlier, a little earlier, 10, 20, 30 minutes longer. And, as the weeks go on, he starts looking into different remedies, sucking on honeycombs, drinking whiskey, all this other stuff. He consults just about everything aside from going to his doctor. And yeah, he's giving his due diligence. But yeah, this is another quote that I really enjoy about the nature of aging, which is in this, and it's getting old was like getting a bad dessert at the end of a really fine meal. That's apparently something that Ralph's deceased wife had said. And so it's a very well written book with these themes and with just kind of this, I don't know, looking ahead and trying to just pre-prep yourself to gain some sort of resolution. As King is Ralph Roberts' age now, so it's interesting just looking back 25 years before, and King in his late 40s putting this book together and stuff. It's cool. And okay, so that really, until I start getting into some deeper plot beats and stuff like that, that's just kind of our setup. And so as Ralph is kind of starting to lose more and more sleep, and he's tried the different remedies and things like that, that's when the psychedelic aspect starts to kick in. That's when he starts seeing the strings floating from people's heads with a balloon on the end, and that's like some sort of like string of life force sort of thing. And he also starts to see just auras from people, and I always think of Almost Famous, your aura's purple. So funny. I love that movie. But yeah, so he sees different colors around different people and around different places too. So there are not just energies emanating from things that are alive, but there is still residual energy from things that have either existed there before or might be dead now, or just whatever. There's still just the faintest sort of thing going down. And yeah, it's all of that stuff I absolutely love. The other half that we have to mention, though, is also at the very beginning of the book. Ralph meets this guy, Ed Deepnaw. And Ed Deepnaw is an incredibly intelligent guy. He works at, oh boy, it's mentioned right at the very beginning of the book, and I'm trying to remember. This dude ends up kind of losing his mind and losing his job. But I want to say he works at a facility, or he's some sort of engineer, biochemist, something. Anyway, he is an incredibly intelligent and very just kind and decent dude in Ralph's estimation. He is friends with Ed's wife, Helen, and loves Natalie, their little baby. And so, yeah, when he sees this Ed guy going bonkers nuts after this car accident thing and accusing this guy of, having baby fetuses in the back of his vehicle, and turns out it's just a bunch of soil, and like, it is a weird exchange, but it kind of shows that this guy has like a loose screw or two, and yet Ralph thinks nothing of it until a few months later, after Carolyn has passed away, and we rejoin Ralph, and he's trying to find his footing and just get some goddamn sleep, for goodness sake. Yeah, he sees this nasty thing go down with Ed and Ed's wife Helen, where Ed beats the crap out of her like a piece of garbage, because any man who would ever do something like that obviously is absolute trash. And yeah, Helen is found, and basically Ralph goes to confront dude, and dude is just sitting shirtless. He's got the sprinklers going on him, and he's like singing. I want to say he's singing Jefferson Airplane or something. Feed Your Head song. White Rabbit. Love Alice in Wonderland. Anyway, though, so yeah, Ralph goes to confront him, and this Ed dude seems just completely out of it. Like, he barely even remembers what's going on, doesn't think anything should be of any issue. And then in turn, he's taken into custody and all this other stuff. But the reasoning for him doing it, though, for beating up his wife, is because of the fact that she had signed this petition to get this this feminist women's rights speaker named Susan Day. Hey, Susan Day, how many kids have you killed today? To come out and speak in Derry. And he saw that his wife signed the petition, and she's like, no, I wasn't even being super cognizant of what I was signing. But since she signed that petition, that's why he laid his hands on his wife. And disagreements of, politics and social issues and such are one thing, definitely things to, make amends with before you marry somebody, probably. But, bottom line, that disagreements are one thing, but that's sort of any sort of physical affliction is just as awful gets. And so, yeah, that goes down, and it's terrible. And that's where really we get the whole there's two different conflicts in this. There is the conflict with Ralph and this Atropa. I'm trying to remember how the hell you pronounce his name. Atropos. I don't know. It sounds Greek as hell, doesn't it? And there is actually a connection with Greek mythology that is made at one particular point. The story of these three sisters who had like the life force of the whole world in their hands. We'll get to that at some particular point. But so yeah, Ralph has his whole conflict with the Atropos dude, who is this villainous little doctor guy once he starts getting to these other levels of consciousness from lack of sleep and everything. And in turn, he also meets two others, which are Ledesma and Cloto, or Lechesis, I don't know, and then Clotho, obviously. So essentially, as he gets to his higher levels of this consciousness from the lack of sleep, he finds out that there's, this one villainous little doctor, alien-looking guy. He mentions Inside View, which is another fun Easter egg, and yes, Easter Egg City, just like Jacob said. And then the other two, Lechesis and Clotho, they're basically the good ones who are. So these two little dudes basically go around, and they, when people are ready for their lives to end, they keep hitting this damn thing. They keep they have a pair of scissors with them, and they go and they cut the little strings with the balloons on the end. And it's very strange initially, but once you get your head around just the essence of the visual and stuff, it makes sense. And it's cool. But so they are part of one yin yang balancing sort of thing. And then the other is the Atropos guy, who is like the bad little doctor who is going around being a mischievous, murderous asshole. And he essentially takes things from different people. And since they can't see these strange beings because of the level of existence that they dwell within, when they're losing anything from a hat to a comb to earrings to whatever it may be, there is an essence of life force that is drained by those things, and then he essentially just holds on to them for gaining power in his weird little lair in Daria. Like, it is a weird story, man. It's a weird story, and but it works. The more I read it, the more I actually get down with the weirdness of these little doctors and the balance within all levels of reality that they discuss. And they go into such in-depth stuff here about the nature of Ka and Ka-Tet, in some ways deeper and from a different perspective than Roland goes after it in the Dark Tower books and stuff. It's I don't know, it's explained in some ways in more layman's terms, and it's not in the high speech or anything like that. So I don't know. There's so many interesting counterbalancing things. There's this idea of the random in the purpose that King proposes here. And so the purpose is the two guys who are going around, and the two little doctors who are going around, and actually, those who their time has come, and whether they're old or young or whatever, it's supposed to be. It's the purpose. It's kind of like destiny. But then the random, which is what the Atropos little doctor dude, the evil one, represents, is the random. And the random is essentially those who exist outside of those constraints and just try to go around mucking everything up and just throwing things off to a degree, or so I surmise. I've seen there's a lot of theories and a lot to debate about this particular book and the nature of some of the different dueling and balancing energy things. And that's not necessarily to say that the random is evil, because it's one of those, you can't have one without the other sort of things. And but then these guys on this other level, they are long timers, so to speak, whereas Ralph and Lois and all of their human friends, they're considered short timers. And that's with reference to just how long they exist for. And yet even though the little Dr. Longtimer guys are like, there are certain aspects to you short timers that we can't really relate to, and it makes you more nuanced and interesting than us to a degree. So there's, I don't know, between the random and the purpose, and short timers and long timers, and I mean the crazy 95-year-old door guy being just affluent with all of these things, and almost being like a I don't know, mercenary in some strange degree of the purpose. It's just, I don't know. This is such a layered book. It is just insane. All of the levels to it, and I can't say that I love every level of it. As I mentioned, the brooding conflict between the pro-lifers and the pro-choicers, and this woman coming to speak, and that whole other plot to this story. That conflict doesn't compel me anywhere near as much as the otherworldly conflict with the introduction of the Crimson King, and with Atropos, and the strange, friendly little doctors, Pathos and Lecasis or whatever. Man, I just could not, for the life of me, remember the names of those two little dudes. But yeah, so how many different levels of conflict? Maybe that's why King feels like this book is trying too hard. Maybe he does feel like he overstuffed the turkey to a degree within this. And so that's really, I've given enough of the setup for the basis of all of our conflict in this book so far. And yeah, we have three very interesting parts, and there's some other themes I obviously want to touch upon. But I'm going to jump back to the chat and just see what sort of thoughts all of you have, since I have just been rambling on, which actually makes total sense because one ring to rule them all, and then ramble on, Plant is talking about Gollum and everything. And in the darkest depths of Mordor. So let's check out as I get a little bit of my tea what we got here. Okay, let's back to about where we were. Okay. White Tim says Insomnia was the second Stephen King book I bought when it first came out. Yeah, so 25 years ago, man. That's what's up. Okay, I read Insomnia when it was published, but at the time I hadn't read the Dark Tower books, so found it confusing and, dare I say, it's a bit boring. Now that I'm up to speed, I guess I should read it again. Yeah, and once again, and LL, that's the way that I felt about that book. The first time I read it, I hadn't read any Dark Tower stuff. I just so many of the Easter eggs and the other references and stuff like that. I mean, it's cool to hear Ben Hanscom's name mentioned, and it's cool to meet up at the Derry Library with Mike Hanlon, who still lives in town, and he's still doing his thing. But he only has really like one scene, and it's not particularly memorable. It's just a fun little Easter egg for fans of it, I guess. But he doesn't say anything particularly compelling. It's almost it feels forced, having him in there. But Luis Almodovar says, what Dollar Baby short story you and your buddy would make? Oh boy, this was we have a big project that we're going to be announcing later this month, everybody, and that is coming from Cecil and some very fun people that a collaboration process is going down for, and the rest of the team is helping out wherever we can, which is dope. But yes, that announcement is coming later. But Kim and I have been joking about how we should either do our second sweet short, because him and I have had an idea for a couple years now for what the second one would be. But yeah, besides that, maybe I'll save it till the end. But would I love to do the Reach. I'm not sure if the Reach has actually been made into a Dollar Baby yet. I wouldn't be surprised if it is, but you could do it low budget. And if you got a great actress and you could do it with a small cast, and it's just such a cathartic and sad and beautiful story. Actually, The Reach has a shizload in common in a lot thematically with this book, Insomnia. So let's see what else we got on here. Same here. Yeah, I didn't begin Dark Tower. Okay, cool. That was White Tim chiming in. Okay. Chief says, I read this book after I finished the Dark Tower series. I thought it was pretty good. It was a little slower, but made up for it towards the end. Yeah, once it really gets going with all of the tower connections and like the third act especially, it gets kind of bonkers. I like the tower connections in Insomnia. Jacob says, I'd really like a series on a mini-series, but I don't want them to do full-on tower connections, even if I feel like it would confuse King fans when they watch it. Yeah, Jacob is totally right about that. If they did do this as a television series, I kind of agree. You cut out the tower connections, and I feel like they could do this 10 episodes, as I mentioned earlier. Do it 10 episodes and call it I don't know, Return to Derry, or Back to Insomnia, Back to Derry, or Back to Derry, Insomnia, or something like that. I think that would give that connection to people, and yes, I think that would be really dope. The Manhammer AR-15, Mr. Fuego, que paso, good sir. Okay, Nick Oakes is on there. Nick, I saw your message when I was getting done at the hotel, and I am gonna respond, and I am also gonna talk when I do the Full Throttle review about meeting Joe Hill this past week. It was badass, man. He was such a sweetheart. Hey friends, I love this book. Keep up the great work, Fuego, says Nick. Okay, just making sure we're kind of caught up on the stuff. Sarah Counts is back. Cool. Oh, my dude Blue is on here. Blue, it has been a hot minute, sir. I don't know when time would be permissible, but there's a lot of the King stuff this past year I would really, really dig picking your brain about, man. I was actually with Luis Cisma on the Stephen King podcast recently, Blue. I'm not sure if you got to check it out, but we've been talking about some sort of cool big crossover with some of the other King people. I don't know if that would ever be a possibility with you Skyping in or something of that nature, but if you're ever down, Blue from Cemetery Dance, that would be super, super fun. And he says, one of the few King books I've only read once. I need to revisit it. Okay, Mikey says, yeah, cancer's not fun. I've been there. It sucks. Same, Blue. I read it about 10. Yeah, and that's the thing. She's got brain cancer, Ralph Roberts' wife at the very beginning, and it is just soul crushing, man. And then Mike Noonan thinks that's the right spelling, meets Ralph Roberts in Bag of Bones. Yes, Ralph Roberts does actually show up shortly before his death in Bag of Bones. It's very sad. They even mention him getting, well, what happens with him, which I'm not going to mention till the very end here, although this is a spoilery discussion. I suffer from insomnia in real life. Thankful I haven't experienced this stuff with the auras in this book. I actually think it'd be pretty dope if you can't sleep, like, wouldn't it at least be exciting to start looking more youthful and you're seeing like the auras of people and you can read them better and stuff like that? Okay, White Tim also says airport, if I remember right. RJ Price stepping in for a second. Long days and pleasant nights, everyone. I wish I could enjoy the full palaver uninterrupted. I am in and out on Saturdays, busiest. Well, RJ, I'm gonna check out Swan Song, that McCannon book. So thanks very much for the recommendation, and I look forward to giving you some thoughts. Dan Eredondo, hey Fuego. I was the guy that started my journey during the Carrie live stream. That's awesome, man. I'm curious how far you've gotten in that. So please let me know in the comments below if you are still hanging around. Jacob is still here, which is dope status. Off topic, but Bag of Bones has some great Easter eggs. The George Stark one is pretty great. Yeah, it does have a lot of Easter eggs, although I'm not a big fan of the book. Also, tickled pink when they find, yeah, that's something I was going to get to here in a little bit, man. The single shot actually want to move the mic stand back a bit, Fuego. So am I too loud now? Oh, or is it because I just keep hitting it? Yeah, that's the problem. That is the problem, everyone. Okay. And of course, it scrolled back up. Okay, can't remember exactly, but Mike Noonan was on the best-selling authors, and he mentioned, okay, yeah. Been meaning to reread Bag of Bones. Yeah, I reread it. I still. Oh, there's some foreshadowing going on with some of the characters that y'all are commenting about in here, foreshadowing to the Book of the Month announcement that's coming at the end here. White Tim says, well, he does say Insomnia and Rose Matter are his trying too hard books. Yeah, exactly. Okay, we are almost all the way caught up. Okay, forgot to say long days and pleasant nights. It's good to see my favorite constant reader. Sarah, you are so sweet. Thank you so very much. As always, may you have twice as many, madam. Okay, American No Party Loyalists. Hey, I was busy doing a giveaway. I had no idea that you were live right now, Fuego. I'm not sure who that is, but is it Anthony Smock, perhaps? Okay, Blue says, hit me up, man. That sounds fun. Coolness, dude. I most definitely will. I'll shoot you a DM on Twitter, man. Okay, Enabel Riveros, hey Fuego. Dan says, I had a little King, what did it say? King hiatus reading. Hey, that's the thing. I usually read like one King book and then one other King book. And even when I was on my journey, it probably wouldn't have lasted me almost 8 years, if not for the fact that I would take breaks and I would read like, I don't know, Heinlein, or I would read, I would read a Joe Hill book, or I would read, I do read a lot of graphic novels, lots of stuff by Garth Ennis, and, I went back and read Akira, and there's lots of different things that I divide my time with. So I can definitely feel you. Now that we have everybody caught up on the comments, I can put that back down to it and just give a few more of my thoughts here. So yeah, man, it's so all the Crimson King stuff, once that finally starts seeping through, and you find out that this Ed Deepno guy, who, the dude who abused his wife and is affiliated with these pro-lifers and stuff like that, extreme pro-lifers too. Like one of the more, it's almost borderline amusing just because of the outrageousness of it. So there is a scene early on where, well, it's not super early on, but it's when this group attacks this clinic where there's it's basically like a Planned Parenthood is the best equivalent that I could make mention. And so these peeps go throwing like fetuses, almost like what appears to be aborted fetuses, and there's like fake blood splattering out of them, and they come in hoods and stuff, if I remember. It's a really just wacky, very strange scene. And yeah, but all of those Crimson King references, man. Once we find out that Ed Deepnaw is being manipulated by the little Atropos dude, and then he in turn has it's almost like a puppet master to a smaller puppet to a smaller puppet sort of thing, with the Crimson King on the very top and the Atropos guy intending to use Deepnaw to basically have somebody die who their death would have that same reverberation factor across many levels upward and many others that go like not just up but to the sides and stuff as well. And so that person has to be saved according to Lekasis and Klothos, just to make sure that this very very important thing that this person is going to do later on in the Kingverse. This because this character actually shows up in Dark Tower 7 in the back half of it. And so I mean, we don't know that until like a decade later. And the fact that King had at least that aspect planned out that far back is intriguing to me. But there's connotations made between the Crimson King and King Herod, and more abortion metaphors and just the death of young, very, very young infants metaphor, and the fact that he's compared to King Herod from from the New Testament when Christ is born and stuff. And in the Gospels, King Herod goes, and when he hears that another king has been born, has just been born, and it's like a true king of the Jews and all this other stuff, what does he go and do? He goes and he kills like all of these newborns. It's almost like we're talking about the balancing act, the yin and the yang, the random and the purpose and stuff. This is almost like the New Testament equivalent of what happens in the Old Testament with the angel of death in the 10th plague on the Egyptians, with if you didn't have the blood on your door, all the firstborns would die and stuff. It's a weird, like almost counterbalance in my estimation, being raised Reformed Baptist and, affluent with all of this silliness. But yeah, King Herod doesn't get to Jesus in the Gospels because of the fact that they flee to Egypt. Ha! Irony. It almost sounds like a made up story. Anyway, so yeah, King Herod, like they say that the Crimson King is essentially King Herod, like reincarnated to some strange degree, and that he's jumped from body to body. I mean, who knows how much shade is being cast or how much truth in all of the, King mythology, but it's a really crazy comparison. And I thought that was indeed interesting. And yet, yeah, this Ed Deepnaw guy, despite seemingly, looking presentable and taking control of this pro-life group and everything, he still has his super crazy streak that he is hiding from everybody, and he believes that there are these centurions out that they have to. I mean, he really goes deep into the bonkersness of the way that he's being manipulated. You see, I'm still hitting it, man, because I talk so demonstratively with the hands and everything. So yeah, that's really and when Ralph finally has his like kind of confrontation in the third act with the Crimson King, and he's like got the cat, he's looking like a catfish and the teeth and all the craziness. I mean, we essentially have like 3 different confrontations with like different levels of craziness, and Ralph has one with all 3 of those different levels of the puppet mastery, and so it goes from one level to a higher level, and then back down to the lower level, but the level that could affect them most directly in Ed. So it does go from Atropos to the Crimson King, and then closer to home, I guess, with Ed Deepnaw and the craziness of that confrontation, which takes place in a plane. But yeah, it's nuts. Another thing that I do have to also mention that I had here in the notes is the fact that returning to Derry has a very cool nostalgia to it. It genuinely does, and that's for the sheer fact that just being there and hearing about the Barons and hearing about Neibolt Street, which is mentioned quite a few times, and Juniper Hill is mentioned, where they sent Mr. Bully Boy back in it, Mr. Bowers, and then also there's mentions to all of the other king towns in the Kingverse. You've got Ludlow, you've got Haven, where the Tommyknockers took place. Ludlow being where that's where his friend Lois goes to play poker with her friends and stuff, and that's where Pet Cemetery took place. And meeting Hanlon once again. Ralph thinks of Adrian Mellon getting killed at the carnival. He also mentions various times about the huge flood of '85 when the town was destroyed. I mean, it's Easter egg we obviously go back to the Rite Aid where Eddie was getting his medication and stuff like that, and of course you've got Joe Weiser there, and Joe, he's like, I used to be wise, but now I'm wiser. I thought that was clever and that was fun, and so there's just so many different in references, and as I said, first there's a few different confrontations with this random doctor, the evil one, this Atropos dude, and it kind of just Ralph sees the nature of the just murderous, the mischievous maliciousness that this guy is putting forth, and he tries to kill this dog. He does end up killing his buddy McGovern, who is already going through all of this suffering because this friend of his is terminally ill, and has first he has like the dementia, super Alzheimer's setting in, but now he has pneumonia and he's on the verge of death. And then Bill ends up not even outliving his friend, who he's mourning and has this like heart attack from due to the little bastardo alien looking doctor guy that would be on the cover of Inside View. And so, yeah, they finally do come across his lair after they follow like this weird trail of his energy, him and Lois, after they're both tripping and they're both going through doing their thing. And of course, the trail leads them down Nebolt Street. Does that surprise you in any way, shape, or form? Dude's lair is like a little hobbit house that's like under this tree, and they go into his lair, and there's so many different things that have been stolen by this little Fuego over the years. And he's got everything from, old jazz saxophones that look decades old to, he has wedding rings, in this weird like life force bag sort of thing, which is allowing him to drain all of this energy from all these different people he's stolen shit from that he's eventually going to kill. It's just, once again, layers, man. This book has so much going on, and in some ways it does take multiple readings and a very deep understanding of King's stuff to appreciate it. Once again, first time I wasn't really a big fan. Second time I appreciated it more. And the last time I read this book was 2 years ago in 2017, right after I watched the original It movie with just the kids that Muchetti did. And I was like, oh, I want to go back to Derry. And so another Easter egg being one of the things that you see in Atropos' lair is the shoe of One Gage Creed. So that's just another of the immense amount of Easter eggs that we have in this story. And it's well done in that regard. Once again, those are my favorite parts of the book. The parts of the book that I'm not as big of a fan of is the fact that, Ralph being such a so close with Ed Deepnaw, the guy who's going crazy and is affiliated with the pro-lifers and abused his wife. His wife has obviously left him. And Helen, being said woman, she gets herself affiliated with all of the people that are trying to bring in this Susan Day feminist speaker and to work at that like halfway house / like clinic of sorts and stuff. And so she's staying there. And with her and Ralph being so close, he ends up at odds with all of those crazy pro-lifer extremists, one of which is this guy who confronts him in the library. And Mike Hanlon, comes and discovers him after he's been stabbed a few times, which is crazy, and I'm trying to remember the name of that guy. I want to say Pickering. He's essentially the dude who is much more bonkers, or at least has a harder time controlling how bonkers he is in comparison with Deepnaw. And so they're working in tandem, and Pickering is doing like some of the really nasty, dirty work. He actually forges an assault, like a full-on, like with weapons assault on that clinic halfway house place. And so it's thankfully at the point where Lois and Ralph are at their weird levels of just their telepathy, and they can even like, as they hone their skills more, they can like shoot energy, and they're shooting at the weird evil doctor at certain points, and they go in and they save this young kid, this Patrick Danville, who they also have a little bit of not even direct interaction with, but he plays a big part in the big finale of things. And so those are, once again, that's the aspects of the story that I'm not as compelled by. The assault on this particular place. When we're dealing with the otherworldly forces, that's when I'm compelled with this story. And when we're dealing with all of the, I guess, ground level aspects and the day-to-day, I mean, Derry being a place where there's always that negative energy, it kind of is alluded to make sense that there would be this sort of conflict between these two despondent groups going down, because dairy is a hubber, and it's a hub for negative energy of this nature. And yeah, so that's why there's all this bloodshed, all this craziness going down. But another thing, before he's completely lost all of his sleep, there's this like nasty nightmare. That's another scene that I'm really compelled by, and it's where Ralph sees his wife Carol, and it's almost like Creepshow, where she's buried in the sand, and it's just like she's on the low tide area, and or the high tide area. I don't know. Basically, the one where as it gets closer, she'll get drowned, and so her head is just there, and he wants to go save her, but he can't, and like all the water is starting to come on, and she's very obviously going to get drowned, and there's this point where all of these black bugs like spill out of her mouth, and it's just this frightening, nasty nightmare that he has, and it's very chilling. And she's trying to warn him in this dream, one of the last few that he has before he's like completely insomnia dunzoid in that regard. And yeah, it's a disturbing dream sequence. I must admit, it's one that I really can get behind and stuff. And I mean, his wife is telling him the entire time, it's a long way back to Eden, man. And it's basically her paraphrasing that. And we've got to get back to the God, and good 60s song. But yeah, so it does inevitably boil down to, the conflict with the higher powers and stuff, as I mentioned. And yet the final one that goes down after the clinic has been attacked, after they have gone down to Atropos lair, that's the weird little hobbit house, like I said, and Ralph just keeps having Lord of the Rings stuff going through his head. And after, in turn, he has his little back and forth with this nasty little doctor guy, and doctor guy is saying, well, for messing with my plans, I'm going to go back and I am going to get Helen's daughter at one particular point. So the abused woman who he's friends with, who has got him in the abortion clinic camp, yeah, this little doctor knows exactly where he can hit Ralph to just get him just a completely, just if he can't go after Ralph, and he can't, he's going to go after something that will absolutely crush his heart, and then have him have to witness it and deal with it, and just know that he had a hand in the death of this very young girl, and just the sadness of all of that. And then in turn, we have this crazy psychedelic, like other level experience of him talking with Lecasis and Clotho, and just saying, look, I want to give my life instead of little Natalie, when that does in fact come about. And he has this whole like foreshadowing thing that she's going to get run over by a vehicle, and he knows that he just needs to be there at that time, and he will gladly sacrifice himself instead. So very noble, obviously. And it's almost kind of I don't know, kind of John Smith in that regard. And I do see certain similarities thematically with the whole a sacrifice that's never known, lay down your life aspect that we have at the end of the Dead Zone, and I just adore that as well. Yeah, it's just there's so many cool nuances to the multiverse aspect of this story. And yeah, Deepna ends up deciding that he's gonna go kamikaze crazy. He's even wearing this weird scarf at the very beginning of the story, which was like this Japanese scarf. Japanese in World War II, the kamikaze pilots that were basically just flying their planes into stuff, killing themselves. And yeah, that's essentially what Homeboy has decided he is going to do. He is going to get in this small plane, and despite the fact that he's flying in too low airspace, and he's going to crash it into this like convention center where Susan Day is going to speak. It's nuts. And the only way for Ralph and Lois to actually avert this is through astral projection, and it goes off the rails. It's crazy, and I love it. That's where this story just, I don't know, it's bonkers. And I can see with all of the effects that would be necessary, and with this sort of thing, like it would be tough to make this. And well, it wouldn't be tough. It would just be expensive to make this into a thing. And I do imagine that's really one of the main reasons why it hasn't been turned into something. And yet it does deal with those complex, issues of spousal abuse, the hot topic of abortion, which with our current president has renewed discussion and everything from conservative camps. And I'm not going to say my feelings one way or the other, because I'm just here to talk about this story. But The confrontation with Deep No, I actually find very satisfying. And I mean, Ralph projects himself like up into the plane, and he starts like tearing wires and doing all this stuff so that Ed will crash it. And so, yeah, he doesn't end up getting the convention center, but he does still crash in the parking lot, and a ton of people still die, including Susan Day, the speaker woman. This piece of glass flies, and it like flies through into the convention center, and it slices her head off. And I was just like, man, it's not the sort of choice I think King would make in a book of his today. There's no way he would kill the feminist speaker woman, even if the way King writes it, he's like, yeah, well, the pro-lifers are way worse, but the pro-choices are almost like stirring the pot, and they're just kind of thumbing it in faces, and they're trying to incite conflict. That's what they want. And since that's what they want, I mean, King doesn't necessarily present it as being the most, like it's very agenda driven, and it's not the most noble course of action to just be so I don't want to say filled with bravado or arrogant or whatever, but they just really want conflict. And King does imply that he doesn't think that that's the right course of action. I mean, fight fire with fire, like the Metallica song. But so yeah, the plane crashes and tons of people still die. I mean, it's not the sort of body count, but I think they say like 70 people die regardless at this rally thing. And then there's a bunch of cars that blow up, and so there's still a ton of destruction. And Ralph Roberts just basically describes it as Derry getting off easy. And I guess, I mean, if the last big horrible Armageddon-esque thing that transpired was the flood of '85, then yeah, I guess this, in the grand scheme of things, not quite as bad, but nonetheless, it's a weird book. It's a weird book, and I mean, just once again, the themes about aging are really fascinating. Before I forget, since it just occurred back to me, is there are the three different parts in this, and so the third one is the Crimson King, when we finally get that reveal and stuff. And we do have our prologue. But winding the Death Watch. Old age is an island surrounded by death, as King says in the prologue. And then the second part is the bald doctors, and that's Ralph getting acquainted with them. There is a gulf fixed between those who can sleep and those who cannot. It is one of the great divisions of the human race. And yeah, there were brilliant people like Einstein, obviously, that didn't really sleep, and so that's a thing to keep in mind and discuss a little bit. But it's without sleep, how can you recharge? How can you just get your mind where it needs to be and everything? But part two, The Secret City, Old Men Ought to Be Explorers, a quote by T.S. Eliot. It's a very cool thing that King kind of counterbalances in this story. So whereas it was a story about kids, this is a story about old people, basically second childhood and stuff. And we meet this whole circle at various times in the book of these elderly friends that include Dor, that include McGovern, obviously, include Florence, and all of these other people that we get. And they're very, very, very minor characters, and we don't really learn an immense amount about them. But the second part is called The Secret City, and King, at the beginning of part two, basically says, I think this is right here. Okay. The dairy of the Old Crocs was not the only secret city existing quietly within the place Ralph Roberts had always thought of as home. As a boy growing up in Mary Mead, where the various old Cape housing developments stood today, Ralph discovered there was, in addition to the dairy that belonged to the grown-ups, one that belonged strictly to the children. There were the abandoned hobo jungles near the railroad depot on Niebald Street, where one could sometimes find tomato soup cans half full of multi-gitney soup and bottles with a swallow or two of beer left in them. There was the alley behind the Aladdin Theater, where Bull Durham cigarettes were smoked and black cat firecrackers sometimes set off. There was the big old elm, which overhung the river, where hundreds of boys and girls had learned to dive. There were the 100, or perhaps it was closer to 200, tangled trails winding through the barrens, an overgrown valley which slashed through the center of town like a badly healed scar. These secret streets and highways, in hiding, were all below the adult plane of vision and were consequently overlooked by them. Although there had been exceptions, one of them had been a cop named Nell. So yeah, they talk about Mr. Nell, which is cool, which we meet in the 50s part of it. But I don't want to go too in depth into all of this, but yeah, essentially the idea is that there is another secret city in Derry besides the one that your regular grown-ups have, and besides the one that has the kids, and that's the ones of the elders of the elderly, and how they basically have their own circles of playing chess and just going around and hanging at these particular spots and stuff. And so it's just King doesn't necessarily look with derision at aging, but he does look at it with cynicism, as I mentioned. But he does stuff. But there is in no way in this story at any time that he makes Ralph Roberts feel incapable. He rises to the occasion impressively, and he is a very strong, captivating protagonist. And it became even more apparent to me than ever before with this particular reading, when I was just like, yeah, I actually really, really enjoy the character of Ralph Roberts. He is great. And just the fact that he goes to battle with this otherworldly little, like, demon alien bastard, and then goes to battle with the Crimson King long before Roland actually meets him properly in person and stuff. I mean, and then to astral project himself from this plane of existence up to a higher level, and then into this plane and mess everything up, and then his lady has to come in and save him and pull him out so he doesn't blow up along with all the plastic explosives that Deep Gnaw has on him. But it's just, I mean, he's a badass, even more so because of his age. It's really, really captivating. And so one thing that does have to be mentioned is the child that is one, but most notably because he calls them angels, Lois and Ralph, when they get there, because they basically they can jump to these like upper levels of existence and they can't be seen by anybody. And then when they jump back down to the lower levels, they can like reappear. It's nuts, man. And as somebody who ate their fair share of loco songos, boomers back in the day, in my 20s especially, I can say that yeah, this is really trippy storytelling here, man, and it's just very cool, and I vibe it all greatly. But with averting the utter destruction of the place where this rally is taking place, they save the life for the second time of one Patrick Danville, who is he's young, he's only a few years old in this particular time that we meet him, and we re-meet him in book 7 of the Dark Tower. He's all grown up, and he has been injured pretty significantly in his capture, and it's just he plays a big part. Although it does say like, and I had to write the line down because they're like 18 years later, and this is what the docs or the good doctors are telling Ralph and Lois near the end of the book and stuff like that, after they've averted the utter destruction of everybody at the rally. They're like 18 years later, shortly before his death, he saves the lives of 2 men, one of which is needed to maintain balance between the random and the purpose. And I'm trying to remember in the 7th book when they meet Patrick Danville and they like essentially rescue him. It's Roland, and if I'm not mistaken, it's Susanna and Oy, and it's just down to the 3 of them, and he joins them. So maybe, I mean, I don't know. If anybody in the comments, I really wanted to go back as I was finishing this book last night. It was really late though. I wanted to go back and jump into Dark Tower 7 and skip ahead to those last couple hundred pages where Patrick Danville is discovered by Roland when they're, going towards the, where they're actually almost at the tower. They've like trying to remember if it's shortly before or shortly after they have gone to, they're in, the kingdom of the Crimson King and everything, the court of the Crimson King, as yes, to reference that king, Crimson Strong. But yes, so Patrick Danville, his life is saved here, and his life is the one that, if he was killed beforehand, which is what the Crimson King was trying to do, it would have affected and messed up things on all the different levels of the proverbial tower and everything. But there's so much discussion about the Wheel of Ka and the nature of Ka-Tet, and the closeness and the connection of all of that. And I mean, when he's in Atropo's lair, Ralph is just thinking about the nature of Khan as it's been described to him by the little doctors and everything. And he's like, Ka is like a wheel that doesn't want to stop. And then he's like, Ka is like a ring, and he says it's like a fish that won't get off the hook. And like, there's all these interesting interesting analogies that because to have somebody in our world wrestling with the idea of Ka, which I know you get a perspective from Eddie, you get a perspective from Susanna, but you get a very interesting different perspective on the nature of Ka. It's not even a different perspective, it's just a variation of it within its explanation. And so it's so tower connected in this, man. But besides the tower connections, to go back to the dairy connection, after they save this very important child's life, and Deep Gnaw's killed, and yet there's still a lot of collateral damage, in it. Lois and Ralph, they get married, and like 5 years go by, 4 years plus. And so even though this book was published in '94, it goes all the way up to like '98, as it just describes very briefly in the epilogue the years that go by after all of this stuff is finally over and done with. And Ralph still has his promise that he needs to get to at some particular point. And so, as is the nature with Derry, I guess everything fades quickly in Derry, and they start to very quickly forget about all of the stuff with the insomnia and their astral projection and auras and little doctors and crimson kings and all of this different stuff. They, as the years go by, they just forget about it. And it isn't until Ralph has the insomnia kick back in many years later of him and Lois being married, and they get a Rosalie 2, which is in remembrance of the dog that the little Atropos Fuego kills, tries to a couple different times, and then finally gets the dog after quite a while, and gets run over by Wiser, which sucks. And he's not that much wiser, I guess. But so yeah, it skips ahead, and we get to that point where it's time for the exchange. And it's tough, and they say the king has trouble sticking the landing. I feel like this is a very good ending. It just takes him a little longer than it should have for him to get to it. The fact that we have this lengthy epilogue and we hear about it, like it does go on too long, before we get to Ralph finally knowing he's in the position where he has to sacrifice himself. A sacrifice that's never known, like that song I wrote about the Dead Zone. Except this one is, I mean, it's much more in a sympathetic, like heroic aspect, as opposed to the misconception as in the case of the Dead Zone with Johnny. But yeah, so it's time to finally pay the piper and to lay down your life in the case of Mr. Roberts. And he's starting, as he's experiencing the insomnia again and knowing the time has come to pay that due and everything. Lois kind of senses it as he's about to go out. And she's just like, no, reconsider, don't do it. And she's behaving very selfishly. And yet it's because they fell in love. And even though King does mention that they didn't love each other the same as they did their first partners and, their first husband and wife respectively, but they did love each other very deeply. And it was a wonderful number of years that they have together. And it's a really sweet romance. And it really is, man. And I definitely can say that it got me significantly in the feels. But, yeah, it's time for him to do it, and it's where the book ends, and I do believe it is a very cathartic and fitting and beautiful ending, despite the sad aspect of it. King just meanders a little bit, so he sticks the landing, so it's a good ending. It's just he kind of, I don't know. It's like the end of goddamn Return of the King, Lord of the Rings, right? All the goodbyes. Watch the extended cut of Return of the King. My lordy lord, that is just too much movie, man. And I love long movies. I love Chapter 2. Nonetheless, though, yes, it's a great ending. And at this point, I definitely, because I feel like it encapsulates things very, very well in this regard. So that aforementioned poem that I am such a big fan of, which is mentioned a couple different times, most notably by our buddy. Let me just do a little turn yourself around. Turn it around. Turn. Okay. So this encapsulates just the rumination and the reflection and kind of that bittersweet sadness. It's got a very Robert Frost, like Road Not Taken type vibe to it, in my estimation, and that's probably why I dig this so much. But this is the poem. I believe it's called Pursuit, and it's mentioned by Dorr to Ralph when he gives him this collection of poetry. And so I mentioned it earlier in passing, just the first bit of it, but it's the back half that really just gets me significantly. And so each thing I do, I rush through so I can do something else. In such a way do the days pass, a blend of stock car racing and the never ending building of a Gothic cathedral. Through the windows of my speeding car, I see all that I love falling away. Books unread, jokes untold, landscapes unvisited. It's cathartic, right? I adore that. And I just reached my midsummer, last month. And so I even feel that sort of self-reflection as a guy in his mid 30s, So it's crazy, y'all. It is truly crazy. But we have been at this for over an hour now, so I most definitely need to wrap things up. I try to keep these in the 80 to 90-minute range, give some initial time for everybody to filter in and whatnot. But let's see how much transpired in the chat since I just went rogue once again. Okay, off topic, but Bag of Bones says, okay, I know where I've been meaning to reread. We're almost there, and this is going to be kind of like the wrap up of sorts as well. Okay, yeah, man. Okay. Daniel Corey says, Slante Fuego. Okay, and then we had, once again, yes, oh, that is Smock. Hell yeah, man. Very, very happy to have you stopping right by. Since there was a lot of talk about playing chess in this book, I heard Dr. Strange say we're in the end game now when I got to part 3 of Insomnia. That's funny. Okay, question that's been nagging me about this book since I read it. Is the Lost Ring ever mentioned in any King books after Insomnia, says Daniel Corey. That is a good question, because we know the wino finds the ring, and this is Ed Deepno's real ring, which was inside the weird energy, like, whatever bag of sorts. And yes, he gets struck by a car right after he finds it, and it rolls into the drain. And as King mentions, he's like, we all know that everything that goes into the dairy drains does not stay lost forever, which is cool. And so, yes, they do hint at it, but to the best of my knowledge, since nothing has, with the exception of a little bit in Dreamcatcher, nothing else really in Dairy except for in 1122. So there you go. The whole carnival thing was painful. Superman Test Vlog says, hey, what's up? I think this is one of King's weirdest books, and that's saying something, says Blue. Yeah, it is an oddity, man. It's so nuanced, and there's so much weirdness going on. Another death that got me was the Bill death, how him and Ralph argued. Yeah, it really is. There is a lot of emotion, and even though Bill McGovern and Ralph Roberts had kind of like a weird, strained at times friendship, it was definitely deep, and they were beyond just, like roommate, tenant, like neighbors of sorts and stuff like that. Okay, Tommy Knockers, yeah, that's something else. Indeed, it definitely is. Finishing up Joe Hill's new one. Once you went live, stopped in to say hi real quick. Well, I'm very, very glad that you did. I don't care about spoilers, but I can't wait to read this book for myself. Mikey Mnemonic says, sounds like after the virus of the Stand failed, this was the next plan by the Crimson King. Like I said, Dan, you have to have read this one after. Yeah, this is very true, since there's so much connective tissue. It's cray-cray. Molly Turner says, I'm intrigued, but I haven't read the story. Still like your channel. Peace. Well, Molly, thanks for dropping in very briefly. The ending kind of hit me hard, but I was happy thinking that Ralph was able to be together with his wife again. Word. I definitely agree with those sentiments. Mnemonic says, you can never have enough Middle Earth. Yeah, that's why Amazon's working on their series, right? And Malito says, great live as always. Much love, Fuego. Now I'm off to reading that last 30 pages of the Institute. Oh, enjoy yourself, good sir. Enjoy. So, yeah, as a whole, it's a book. I think Blue from Cemetery Dance said it the best. This is one of Stephen King's weirdest stories. It is just bonkers strange, and there is probably too much going on at the end of the day. But what are you gonna do? Tis the nature of King and so much of what he does. But I don't know. There probably was a weird burden of comparison for him, where he's just like, man, if I'm putting another story in Dairy, it has to be big and epic and have all of these different aspects going on. Because wasn't that just the case to a immense degree with with it as a whole? So tough to compare to, and nowhere near as good as that book. But even if I'm not super hot on half of the themes that are explored here, and it is very sad in just kind of Ralph feeling like Helen has been robbed of something because of the way her husband abused her, and just the kind of course that her life goes down because of it. But Unfortunately, shitty relationships can really just have lasting effects and stuff like that. But yes, if you have never read Insomnia, I most definitely say you all need to go and check it out. And as art is subjective, find out for yourself. But it is definitely helpful to have some basis of comparison and knowledge of the King multiverse and the Tower series. I mean, they were up to the wastelands when they had published this book for King, and so yes, there was a decent amount of groundwork that had already been laid, and a few other things here and there as well. But so that is my thoughts, everybody, on Insomnia, released 25 years ago last month. But being October, being the spooktacular month, we have another anniversary that we are going to be celebrating for the October book of the month. And it's funny because the chat actually mentioned characters from this book a couple different times in the live chat. That's right, Mr. Beaumont, Mr. Stark. For its 30th anniversary, we will be reading The Dark Half. That's right. You probably can't hear me when I'm going that close, right? The Dark Half. Yes, that is our October Hail to Stephen King book of the month. And with that in mind, I have to urge everybody to go, if you have any interest in Facebook. It's really the only thing I get on Facebook for, with the exception of some stuff here and there from my band Chiron, reverbnation.com/ChironBandAZ. But yes, I run the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group. And the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group is essentially a Ka-Tet of, I think we're at like 666 members, right around there. It's been slowly growing, though, over the last year, almost year and a half since I started it. And I'm the sole admin and moderator on there. So if you want to go on and have some very passionate, respectful palaver with fellow constant readers, whether you're like me and you've read every single published work by Cy King, took me over 7 years to do it, or if you have only seen a couple movies and you're just getting into all of this, it's a great place to just have that sort of discussion, ask questions, and yes, next month there will be another poll in November for what we read. So I'll probably have that go live sometime at the end of October. But for now, for its 30th anniversary, because it came out in October of 1989, Thad Beaumont, George Stark, that's right. We are going to be talking for its 30th anniversary, The Dark Half. So get on it, listen to your Audible, start turning some pages, whatever you're down for. Join me for the journey. I very much look forward to it. So I have to extend a grande gracias. I have been Jaime in Fuego, and y'all can find moi on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I am also here on YouTube on my personal channel, which is called In Fuegotainment. So you can either go youtube.com/Jaime in Fuego, or you can just search ENFUEGO tainment, like entertainment. Yeah, In Fuegotainment. That's where you will find all kinds of Star Wars coverage I've done this past year leading up to The Rise of Skywalker coming in December, as well as tons of fun reviews of the more comedic and dramatic variety. A few of my favorite films this year: Wild Rose, a little indie about a girl in Dublin, or excuse me, Glasgow, I want to say, and I think, yeah. Anyway, she's in the British Isles, and she's dreaming about moving to Nashville to be a country singer. So not the kind of place you would expect to hear someone like that coming from. Won't do, but damn, is it a good movie. Boy, Good Boys is another tremendous film. Obviously, there's big time stuff like Far From Home and Endgame. I review all of that stuff too. So In Fuegotainment, please check it out. I greatly appreciate it. Subscribe, do some of that stuff. But you're here for Spooktacular, so obviously, if you haven't subscribed to the horror show here, we are at almost 30,000 subscribers, which is a number we would love to cross here in the Spooktacular month of October. That would be rad status. So yes, share this video with the hashtag Hail to Stephen King if you were down. And we have a whole Stephen King themed playlist. I have over 180 episodes of this show, and that's just this show, not even including reviews of it, Chapter 2, and various other King things over the years. So there's still a lot to look forward to in this year of 19. And I want all of you to be on that journey along the path of the beam with me. So once again, I have been Fuego. Y'all have been awesome. And until the wheel of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego, sin amigos, and constant readers and viewers alike. But I am hopeful that we get to share more of this palaver sooner rather than later. And until then, remember to stay scared. And read Stephen King. Either read Insomnia right now or, start the dark half with me. I don't know. But read. Seriously. Es muy importante. Thanks so much, y'all. Super cool talk. I actually, I want to get around to finishing this one full throttle. Meeting Joe Hill the other day was terrific. And you can look forward to very soon a review of this book here on the Horror Show as well. And lastly, I definitely have to just check all of the comments as everybody is piecing out. Jacob says, Night Fuego, peace out, my good sir. I'm glad I stopped cold meds from much instead. I'm glad as well. I would have probably thought I was dying. Sarah, feel better? Feel better? Mike Mnemonic forgot to ask about what do you think if It Bleeds is going to be about. Short stories. Well, it's apparently going to be 4 novellas, so I'm stoked for that, Mikey. The author photo of King's shirt is cool. Great discussion, Fuego. Fun times. Bull Squad, I am so very glad that you stopped through. Chief says, hope everyone has a good night. May you all have long days and pleasant nights. Twice as many to you, Chief. And may you have one too, says Marx's brothers. Good night and good night, good sir. Off to watch the mist. Fun, Sir Duel. Have a righteous evening. Malito, peace out. Mikey, peace. Much love to you across the pond, homie. And yes, everyone, I look forward to more palaver with you very soon. Yes, the jockey setup is happening. It's happening. It's all happening. Adios.